Them were the growing up years when things were really going and just getting started. And them were the good old days, and you always had that feeling that you expected it to stay pretty much as it is.
Nothing in life really stays like it is or was. But here in Scott County, Minnesota, one can find many places that seem relatively unaffected by the passage of time. It's still a rural county, true to its beginnings over 150 years ago, with almost 1,000 family farms. Particularly in the southern and western areas of the county, the rural lifestyle is still prevalent, but is rapidly losing ground to recent developments. Not unlike a child who has entered adolescence and gone through a tremendous growth spurt and comes out of it having to face adult issues and responsibilities, Scott County is coming of age and dealing with a whole new reality. Scott County has a rich history that has been told in an 85-minute video that was produced by the Scott County Historical Society to commemorate the sesquicentennial, the 150-year anniversary of the county that was celebrated in 2003. The DVD is entitled Scott County, The New Frontier.
In News of the World today, the Minnesota Territorial Governor Alexander Ramsey signed a bill from the territorial legislature, creating 5 new counties along the Minnesota River Valley. The signing of this bill opened up the territory for settlement. "150 years ago, Scott County was the new frontier. It was a developer's dream. Fertile land, a navigable river with relatively easy access to bigger markets, nearby forests to supply timber for construction. In short, it had everything necessary for rapid growth. And that's exactly what happened. As Scott County celebrated its sesquicentennial year in 2003, it found itself in the same place it was in 150 years ago. It was then, and is once again, the new frontier.
Government is central to our lives. Often what comes to mind when one thinks about government are the large symbolic edifices, such as the Capitol in Washington or the state capitol in St. Paul. Other strong impressions are the history going back centuries, or the documents such as the Constitution. One can't help but be aware of the political aspects of government or focus on the lawmaking functions of the legislature. But all that is actually just a small part of the role that government plays in our lives. And many of the laws, policies, and regulations of the federal and state governments are implemented on a local level by the counties. From the courts and public safety issues, to elections, land records, and development and maintenance of many of the roads.
First item of business that we will take care of is the item 6.
There is a political process on the county level as well. It consists of 7 elected officials, 5 commissioners, the sheriff, and the county attorney. The principal strength of every organization is in its human resources. There are, of course, other factors such as the equipment and facilities that are a part of the overall effectiveness of the organization, but the foundation is formed by the employees. Scott County has always had good employee retention, and that is a tremendous strength. Each year, a select group of employees come together in the boardroom to receive their service awards based on 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and in certain cases more years of service.
Gretchen Young, social worker 2.
Everybody cares about what everybody does. It's not one department working for one department. It's everybody working for the whole county.
And we encourage the staff to make their own decisions, to do new things and try new things so that we're not always using the statement, this is the way we've always done it. So we encourage people to try new ideas and new ways of thinking.
It's just a fun time to be in Scott County. It's right at a point where it's going to start to take off in terms of our population and our growth, and what comes with that, I think, is a lot of exciting opportunities, not only in government, but also, I think, in the other sectors, too.
Scott County is really unique in terms of the culture, the people, the natural resources in the community, the access to the metropolitan area. The most unique thing for me is the people and the cooperative nature that they have for planning for a great future. It's a cooperative and collaborative place to be.
This is Eagle Creek, which flows into the Minnesota River between Savage and Shakopee. The Dakota people had a village near this creek and regarded a spot along this creek as holy. They called it Makayusota. It later came to be called Boiling Springs and became an early tourist attraction in the area. The springs still boil, but not with the intensity of former times. Many wells have been tapped into the source of the springs, diminishing the pressure. The old history of Scott County is similar to the fate of the springs. Although much of the old history remains, it is for the most part diminished, and you have to know where to look. It was also the administrative outpost for the U.S. government. It was the opening portal, the gateway to 24 million acres of Dakota country. Every lake, stream, mountain, spring had a Dakota name. It was their country. In 1848, the westward movement of the United States stopped right here at Fort Snelling. Wisconsin had become a state. Iowa became a state in 1846, and this area had no official U.S. government status. It was just considered Indian territory. 30 miles up the river St. Pierre, as it was still called at the time, or St. Peter's, is an area that is known as Little Rapids or Carver's Rapids. It is the site of a permanent Dakota village under the leadership of Chief Mazomani. It was a great source of the fur pelts that fueled the fur trade. As early as 1803, Jean-Baptiste Faribault had a trading post in this area for part of each year. Between 1802 and 1851, as many as 11 traders may have been at Little Rapids. The life of the Dakota was undergoing extreme stress. The buffalo herds were moving farther away from their villages. The game was being depleted. There was an increasing dependence upon trade goods. There was ongoing conflict with the Ojibwe Indians. A way of life that had lasted for thousands of years was coming to an end. This vast land was being carved into pieces. Each new treaty put more lines on the map.
We're going to talk about what it means to be the best in the business, the new and emerging vision that the county board has adopted. That's a long-term ideal. We're going to personalize it. We'll put some context to it in an abstract statement, and we'll have a conversation with you about what does that mean as we begin to define it in the next few months, in the next year and a half or 2 years. The other day is that our goals are information sharing, camaraderie, learning, conversation, and growth and development.
The vision of Scott County is to be the best public service provider and employer in the business. To guide that process, the Board of Commissioners has generated a set of strategies and goals. They are to create safe, healthy, and livable communities, to develop strong public partnerships and an active and informed population, provide a supportive organizational culture which enhances the county's mission, healthy, well-trained, and dedicated employees, lead the challenge and opportunities derived from growth and development, sustain the county's excellent financial health and economic profile. By implementing this strategy and continuing to develop the capabilities of the nearly 600 Scott County employees, the county is well on its way to becoming the best in the business.
We will now call this meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Once a year, for a day, Scott County junior high and high school students take over the county government. The objective? To show them what they're going to be running in a few years.
It's a day that all of us learn. We're learning from each other, and it's a valuable experience not only for you but for us, because it keeps us sharp. Government is a process. It isn't a product. It's something that keeps going on. It isn't about us as elected people or about employees. As we get together and learn from each other, we have a better government, because the government isn't the people that you see here. The government is all of us. The thought that I'd leave with you today is use this day as a good start for taking upon that responsibility and interacting with all of us so that we make this the country that it can be.
Each of the students is teamed with a Scott County staff mentor from the particular area in which the student has indicated an interest. The county provides a broad variety of services, and the staff includes individuals with many different kinds of skills and training.
Department K-9, and I went
time, and this screen up here will show what
this Unix system holds all of our financials and
conciliation court, which is the court that the public uses.
After the meetings with the mentors and the tours of the various departments, the highlights of the day were the mock trial complete with the case scenario played out, and a mock board meeting where real issues were discussed and acted on by the student board. These students now have a much better understanding of how the county government works and how they, as informed citizens of Scott County, can play a part in making decisions that will impact their lives.
And this is our priorities for this upcoming year, and this is what it's going to cost the taxpayers, and the benefits to the taxpayers is truly a benefit to not only the government officials who are elected to represent the taxpayers.
I have grown up in Scott County. I've lived here all of my life. I grew up on a farm. So for me, Scott County is a great place to live.
If we decide that we were going to go ahead and allow this for 2006, I would state that the notice should be no more than 8.5.
Scott County has taken the avenue that we want to become the best in the business. And in order to do that, there are many different things that you need to do. One of them is tear down some of the barriers between departments, between government institutions, and between local and state governments.
At the Public Works facility, the administrative heads of the Scott County Public Works and Planning Departments meet with local government officials to coordinate efforts on highway issues.
I think a county that's the best in the business, part of it's a frame of mind of the employees. It's an attitude, I think, that they're encouraged to bring to work every day and that they believe they're going to be the best in the business. And I think it goes back to allowing the employees to use their own innovation and creative ideas to do things. And if they're allowed to do that, I do believe we'll be the best in the business.
The mission of Scott County is to deliver quality public services to all citizens in an effective, professional, and efficient manner. Many of those services, like snow plowing and highway maintenance, for example, are often performed without the citizens being aware of them. But when you need direct services like driver's license, passport, birth and death records, taxes and property transactions, you may need to go to the courthouse. You can now find one-stop shopping, so to speak, in the county's multipurpose customer service center.
I think that everybody is a leader. You don't have to be in management to be a leader. I think that everybody is a leader, and I think that by letting staff know that they are leaders in their own area, that it works well to provide the best services we can and to provide them in locations where it's easy for people to get to, easy access.
We are doing passport applications for the German class. They will be taking a trip to Germany next summer, and we come out every fall and we do passport applications, so we go to them rather than them having to come to us. We have about 30 applicants tonight, so 3 people can easily handle that. Start with the photos and go through the applications and start to finish. So it goes real well. We go to all different locations in the county.
I'm a German teacher at New Prague High School, and I think it's a wonderful service for our students. Scott County comes over here, we process all the kids' applications one evening, and it's a lot less stressful for me as a teacher, so it's a great benefit for me as a Scott County resident.
First of all, just by establishing a vision that we're going to be best in the business, I think that's an excellent starting point.
Scott County Community Services administers many programs throughout the county. This is the New Options Day Training and Habilitation Program.
I think it's the county residents who define for us what is the best in the business. I think they're the ones who are going to tell us what is efficient, what is effective, what is quality.
Scott County is many things to many people. For some, it is still the new frontier, a great place to establish new businesses and industries. For others, it is the place they remember from their childhood or the stories of their grandparents. For many, it's one of the last remaining rural agricultural metropolitan counties. For an ever-growing number of people, Scott County is simply home. But it is also the entertainment capital of the state. In fact, only the Mall of America draws more visitors each year.
The list of attractions is long and keeps growing. There's the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, which runs for 8 weeks in the late summer and early fall. Valley Fair is a huge attraction all summer long. Then there's Canterbury Park, the only thoroughbred racing track in this part of the country. Elko Speedway and Raceway Park offer car racing on the weekends during the summer months. Murphy's Landing offers a historical experience into the fall each year. Several apple orchards in Scott County are a festive attraction each fall. And of course, the biggest of them all is the year-round attraction, Mystic Lake Casino. The Minnesota River was the first attraction in Scott County. It was also the primary mode of transportation. It brought the settlement. People and supplies came up the river from St. Paul, and the river also took the agricultural products from the county to the markets. That is still going on. Savage is the 5th largest grain port in the world in terms of volume of grain moved. In 1865, just 12 years after settlement began in Scott County, the railroad arrived. In practically no time at all, the county became an agricultural powerhouse and remain that way for the next 100 years.
Top of the morning on this beautiful fall day in the state of Minnesota and wonderful Scott County. We have our volunteers are bringing some chairs over. I want to welcome everybody here today for this grand opening celebration. We have a host of volunteers and staff who have committed a lot of time, talent.
The Scott County Law Enforcement Center has been many years in the making. Its creation was an indication that the county had recognized the reality that it was reaching maturity and was no longer immune to many of the issues that larger, more urban counties faced. The county had more than doubled in population since the previous jail was opened almost 50 years ago in 1957. That jail will now be demolished. Several thousand visitors toured the Law Enforcement Center at the grand opening. This facility houses the Sheriff's Department, the 911 Center, plus lockdown for both male and female inmates, with enough capacity to handle needs as the county population continues to grow.
Not too many years ago, there was a riding stable very close to this spot. Spring of 2002, a wetland and pasture near Eagle Creek. 3.5 years later, the ducks are gone, and the wetland is now a very large runoff pond. The horses are still there, but they've moved a few hundred yards away. This is a typical situation throughout the county. The skyline of Minneapolis looms on the horizon of this development in Prior Lake. But even in the furthest places from Minneapolis within the county, such as New Prague in the south or Belle Plaine in the west, this type of growth is happening.
This era was introduced in the early 60s when Interstate Highway 35W connected Minneapolis to the county. Suddenly, Scott was not a remote agricultural county to visit on occasion, but a reasonably short commute away. This introduced the second phase of Scott County's history, ending a 100-year period of stable but very modest growth as a primarily agriculturally based culture.
Scott County's status as an entertainment magnet goes back a long way. In fact, 100 years ago, there was a world-class attraction in the city of Savage. It was the International Stock Food Farm, a racetrack and stable that was the home of Dan Patch, probably the most famous racehorse of all time. 93,000 people watched Dan Patch set the world mile record in 1906. The stable has been gone for a long time, but another attraction of that era still exists. At one time, there were 3 health spas in the area: Mud Cura, Jordan Sulphur Springs, and Mud Baden. Visitors from all over the United States came to these spas for the therapeutic sulfur mud baths. Mud Baden even had its own railroad station. The era of the health spas ended in the 1920s, but Mud Baden is still intact, and in fact, it's available for reassignment. Over the years, it has had many owners and has been many things, including a monastery, a chemical dependency clinic, and, most recently, a jail annex for Scott County to augment the 6 small jail cells at the courthouse. With the opening of the new law enforcement center, the jail annex at Mud Baden was no longer needed. Scott County owns the building, and it is on the National Historic Registry, so it can't be torn down, and changes must fall within strict guidelines. So the question arose, what to do with the annex?
Rob and I have had some discussions in the last few weeks about looking at potential sites for the joint training facility, and one of the sites that we came up with, or that we had talked about.
For some time, there has been a need in Scott County and the surrounding area for a regional training facility that could be used by all of the agencies and offices involved with public safety. This type of facility needs to be secure and somewhat remote, yet readily accessible by the highway. In other words, Mud Baden was an ideal choice But this is something that Scott County could not do by itself. It would need to have the cooperation of all the surrounding governments. This is the purpose of SCALE, the Scott County Association for Leadership and Efficiency. In just Scott County alone, there are 19 governments besides the county, 7 cities, 11 townships, and 1 sovereign nation, the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Dakota Community. When you add to that the state and federal elected representatives from the area, plus the adjacent counties and communities, it becomes quite a large group. In order to facilitate larger projects that impact an entire region, this is the kind of coalition that must exist.
One of the things that's really helpful, I think, for the current and future of Scott County is the growth in terms of the leadership within the county. I see it at all levels. I see it at the county board level. I see it at the advisory commission and citizen involvement level. I see it at the community level, at the city council, at the township boards. There's an interest in doing things right and doing things well, and I think that that's a maturation of the place of Scott County.
This effort to repurpose Mudbaden has been successful. It will live on as the Scott County Regional Public Safety Training Facility.
For most people in the metro area, Scott County has always been the place on the other side of the river. That has traditionally been a strong part of its appeal. You cannot tell the history of the county without a serious consideration of the bridges. This is the old Bloomington Ferry Bridge. It has recently been rebuilt, so it is not really old, but this is what it looked like until about 11 years ago, when it was one of the major ways to get across the river into and out of the county. It had become inadequate in the best of times, but it was often completely useless in the spring when the Minnesota River would flood. By 1985, it had become obvious that something needed to be done and that the solution would have to involve the state and even the federal government. The Scott County Transportation Coalition was developed to stimulate and coordinate a plan that would really solve the problem. Almost exactly 10 years later, the grand opening of the new Bloomington Ferry Bridge took place on October 6, 1995.
Marching bands from Bloomington and Prior Lake were symbolic of the cooperation.
The development of the bridge and the Highway 169 bypass was achieved by a stunningly successful collaboration of local, state, county, and federal agencies. Scott County once again became the new frontier, and the rush was on. Scott County had entered the third phase of its history. It left adolescence and entered adulthood.
And this will be a major intersection, this area right.
Now, a bit more than a decade later, it's impossible to imagine life without the no longer new bridge. It had a revolutionary impact on the county. Within 5 or 6 years after its opening, Scott County was the fastest growing county in the northern half of the United States. The 169 bypass is lined with development all the way to the west end of Shakopee. 10 miles up the river, there's a new bridge on Highway 9 near Jordan, crossing the river into Carver County. At the southwest end of the county is Blakely, which still seems to be firmly a part of Scott County's Phase 1 history. Even there, a new river bridge crosses over to Sibley County. These new bridges are virtually prophecies of new growth, destined to prove the old adage, build it and they will come.
40 years ago, I-35 nudged Scott County into Phase 2 of its history, the commuter phase. Now, I-35 is almost unmanageable on a good day. Once again, history repeats. Something needs to be done. County government cannot stop growth and development. It can only manage it, anticipate it, and in some cases, try to catch up to it. Scott County communicates with its citizens through publications like The Scene, a bi-monthly 16-page newspaper, which not only informs the citizens of policies and changes, but solicits and encourages participation in the process. There are many volunteer boards and commissions which are totally dependent upon citizen involvement, such as the Scott County Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission, which meets on a monthly basis to provide oversight and input to the county. Growth has a lot of differing interpretations depending on your situation. It can mean opportunity, a fresh start. For others, it can mean loss. losing something precious that cannot be retrieved. This is the Gretzmacher farm just west of Belle Plaine. This is Wilmer Gretzmacher and his son on their farm in 1997. Wilmer's grandfather started this farm in 1864. Wilmer was born in 1914, just a few years after this photo was taken in Belle Plaine.
And them were the good old days, and you always had that feeling that you expected it to stay, you know, pretty much as it is. But like I said, the way things are changing so rapidly, it's hard to tell what will happen in the next 10 years. Well, there's room for growth in that, but the only thing is if we get rid of too much of the farmland, we're going to run short, because they ain't making any more of it. That's the way I feel. When we get this used up, boy, that's it, fellas.
Wilmer died in 2002, but the family farm remains in his son's hands and the land is still being farmed. Just down the road, a very short distance, development continues. That's the reality all around the cities in the county. They are all developing a suburban ring. So the question remains, how should Scott County grow? Everyone has a stake in the answer to that all-important question. Decisions made now will resonate for generations of future residents. We've entered a period where the extremely rapid growth of the recent past has slowed to a reasonable and more manageable level, giving the county a chance to catch up with the changes of the last 20 years, and allowing them to begin preserving more of those unique characteristics and historical assets that make Scott County so special. In 2004, Scott County took a giant step by creating a regional park called Doyle-Kenneffect. Doyle-Kenneffect became part of the Metropolitan Regional Park System in a ceremony on June 23rd of 2004. The park incorporates the Doyle-Kenneffect House, which dates back to the early 1860s. Another interesting fact about the land is that it was preserved in a close to pristine fashion by Francis Doyle and his family. Interestingly, Francis Doyle was the first planning official in Scott County, and he virtually started the county's planning department. In the future, Scott County will continue to acquire and develop parks and recreational areas to augment the regional and municipal parks already in existence, such as those around Cleary Lake, Murphy-Hanrahan, and Prior Lake. Working hand in hand with its citizens, Scott County government will strive to do everything in its power to assure that the county will always be a great place to live, work, play, and raise a family.
The loss of the innocence of childhood is always somewhat bittersweet. We all know that we cannot turn back the clock, and we begin to remember that age of innocence through the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia. Yet as we grow older, and perhaps wiser, we also begin to see that maturity has its own rewards, its own beauty. We begin to understand that a true coming of age doesn't mean casting aside all that came before, but an embracing of our past, present, and our future.